Meet Jack. Alongside his co-founder Sim, he runs Ideal Direct, a UK-based e-commerce group that manages 10 private label brands across Amazon, eBay and other DTOC channels.
We kind of earned the trust early on and took the reins of the business, and things started going well and we haven't really looked back.
Together, this pair took over a multi-decade family business and transformed it into a modern Amazon powerhouse. Scaling brands, systemizing operations, and thinking well beyond the buy box.
You just don't get the same leverage with your time as you would with Amazon, and I think that was the key difference.
Join us in today's episode as we explore how Jack and Sim turned a traditional mail order business into a lean, data-driven Amazon brand portfolio.
It was a case of, right, we have to get with it or get left behind. They just put things up and kind of hope for the best. So there was no real science around it.
Why they're aggressively pruning SKUs and shifting focus to fewer, higher margin products.
I'm confident in our sort of financial environment and the way that we appraise products. If the opportunity is coming through our system and it's saying, right, the margins are here in our internal targets, then I'd have no qualms with taking on funding.
And the bold shift Ideal Direct is making off of Amazon and what that means for themselves and their brand.
We've created this whole infrastructure and this whole footprint of a company that is more than just an Amazon brand. We just want to see how far that goes.
So if you're scaling on Amazon or simply looking to build systems that grow beyond it, then this is the episode for you.
I think what's really important for us is communication, where we don't attach our ego to any particular idea. If one of us disagrees with something that the other is doing or saying, ultimately we're confident in having a discussion and actually disagreeing and then coming to a common resolution.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying the videos, why not consider subscribing? We drop bi-weekly content that will help you improve your business right here on the channel. Jack, thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for having me, Jordan. It's a pleasure.
Can we just kick off? Because I know that the Ideal Direct kind of business that you guys run now has got long and historic roots back in, I believe, the 70s. Can you just talk me through that kind of journey of the business and how it evolved to what it is in its current form today?
Absolutely. So for those that know of myself or Sim, so you'll know that we effectively took over the family business. So it's Sim's father, my father-in-law. So I married Sim's sister, so a bit of a scandal. Peter, Sim's dad, set up the business years and years ago. So he was a cost accountant for a company in the UK for a number of years and absolutely despised what he did. So he saw the early opportunity of going to China, finding these products and bringing them back over to the UK. And he was effectively one of the earlier adopters of that. And then he managed to get some great contracts with, whether it be newspapers or catalogs and things like that. So it was initially the business started on that model. It was the days of where you'd see an advert in a newspaper or a magazine that you'd then send off your order by post. A few days later, you might get an acknowledgement, and then maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, you get your product. So it was a very, very different world in which we live now. So that went well for a long time, and the business grew, and it was very much bootstrapped. And of course, along came the internet, which completely changed things, right? And the business kind of went through a transition early in the 2000s. So that was still before Sim and I had joined. But ultimately, it was a case of, right, we have to get with it or get left behind. And it was actually Sim as a youngster who helped set up some of the earlier listings. I think they were on eBay first. And then sort of moved into Amazon. But this was like the real start of things. It was kind of like everything was an auction. They just put things up and kind of hope for the best. So there was no real science around it. And because they got in early, there were some products that did really, really well and kind of developed a real healthy moat around them. And to be honest, some of those products are still going today. Some were kind of at the end of their life cycle. We kind of had to move on from those. But ultimately, yeah, it evolved slowly into that online sort of e-commerce business, leveraging the platforms like eBay, like Amazon, and they had their own website as well at the time. Now, effectively, what kind of happened is we got to, so when was it? It was about 2016, 2017, and Peter, Sim's dad, kind of got to the point where he'd been doing it for a long, long time, and effectively the business was built around him and couldn't really function without him, and he kind of wanted to step away. I think on top of that, there was perhaps they kind of hit a little bit of a ceiling in terms of their knowledge when it came to Amazon in particular. And so he asked Sim to join. So Sim joined back in 2017, I believe. And then it was a kind of a conversation that happened in the pub. I was at one of my old accountancy firms at the time. Yeah, I've got to be careful what I say here, but I'm not an accountant at heart. It was, don't get me wrong, it was a fascinating grounding, but um, there was always that entrepreneurial streak in me, and I knew I wanted to do something different. And my wife, Nikki, she knew that I wasn't particularly enjoying it, and she's like, "Well, look, Dad wants to step away. Sim could do us some help. Why don't you go and have a conversation?" So we had a couple of beers, and before I knew it, I'd accepted a job there. And to be honest, at the time, I saw it as a bit of a stepping stone. I was going to go there, help them sort of move things forward, set up some systems or whatever, and then see what I wanted to do elsewhere. But Sim and I got along phenomenally well, and yeah, we kind of earned the trust early on, and took the reins of the business, and things started going well. And we haven't really looked back.
Interesting. I want to touch on a few things that you said. The first one being kind of the shift from mail order to online. Was that because you could see kind of volumes declining from the mail order side? Or was it just kind of opportunity of the internet was clearly where the future was? Like what pushed that decision?
Yeah. It was both, really. Again, that transition kind of started before I joined, but from the stories that I heard, and to be honest, there was still some mail order stuff going on, when I did join. But ultimately, it was clear to see it became such a small percentage of the business, and then we had effectively what was about 75+% of the business revenues were coming from online platforms. But at the same time, the business didn't necessarily have the knowledge that it needed to at that time, and so it was very much, we'll list something, we'll do the basics, but actually there was no deeper dive, there was no knowledge, there was no use of tools like Helium 10 or anything like that at the time. I think there needed to be a big change in culture, a big change in the approach, because I think culturally with mail order, it's very unique, or not necessarily unique, but it's very different to e-commerce because of the pace of things, and obviously how aggressive the competition is as well. So there was a lot of sort of a little bit of a reluctance to make fast decisions at the time. There was a bit of reluctance to speculate to accumulate, so to speak. There was a reluctance to put budget into advertising and do these things to really grow aggressively on Amazon. So they were kind of caught in a little bit of a grey area, a bit of a middle ground, whereby the mail order stuff was clearly on the decline and the opportunities weren't there as they were before. But ultimately, the business kind of wasn't all in terms of pushing forward with the online stuff. So that's effectively what Sim and I wanted to do when we joined, is really grab that opportunity with both hands.
Okay. And you mentioned there kind of, obviously you're doing this in the early days almost of the internet, and it is kind of a wild west. You're trying out different platforms. How do you kind of approach that, and at what point did you kind of shift your focus, away from the eBays, the kind of website, and more towards Amazon?
I think quite quickly Amazon became very, very dominant, right? And those that sell on Amazon will know that you can gain a lot of traction very quickly if you do the right things. And I think that sort of Amazon flywheel, so to speak, is extremely powerful. And you don't necessarily get that with the other platforms. Now, there is a darker side to that. There is, for every good, there is a bad, and perhaps we'll get into that a little bit later. But ultimately, in terms of growing quickly and getting your products in front of customers, doing that on Amazon is fantastic. And if you get your position, whereby your products are really being pushed by the algorithm, then your growth is exponential, right? With eBay, eBay was doing pretty well, and I think we do about £1 million a year still on eBay now, but you just don't get the same leverage with your time as you would in with Amazon, and I think that was the key difference, and recognizing that actually at the time we needed to bootstrap. So we need to go where that our return on time is the best, and that was Amazon.
Okay. And is it so? It's more of a case of you kind of double down on the channels that are working best, like Amazon, and you just you still keep the other ones going. You just don't focus as much on them, rather than like shutting them down.
Absolutely, absolutely, and like I said, eBay still does okay, but it's very, very hands off. And we actually hired someone as an eBay listing specialist a couple of years ago, and she very quickly got sucked into Amazon because it's always the priority. So there is always a little bit of a frustration from some of the guys when they see eBay's not being pushed as much as it could do. But with when it comes to us having resource constraints, we have to go where the rewards are, right?
Okay. And you mentioned something else as well about kind of products reaching the end of their life cycle. Is that kind of a timing thing of when there's product market fit, or is that a case of different channels, different products? Maybe the slowness of mail order is better suited to different products to Amazon? Have you found you kind of changed the brands and products around based on the channel focus?
Um, well, I would say our strategy is very much when we're sourcing now, is sourcing for Amazon. So, as I kind of alluded to there, the other marketplaces are certainly an afterthought. But I think with some of the earlier products, I think one of the products which was basically made it from mail order onto Amazon and is still going today, but it was like a wooden shoe stretcher. And there used to be a running joke. It's like, how the hell is this still selling? Like, surely everyone in the UK has got at least one by now. Right? It was just bizarre. But then, we start to see products like that start to slow down. And I think it was just a case of one, a little bit of market saturation in terms of people have already got what they need, but two, competition increased massively. And so a lot of products became commoditized quite quickly. And actually, we found that because we were part of the Amazon vendor program for a couple of years, which probably the biggest mistake that we made. But we were effectively, I'm judging by your smile that you've probably heard that before, but we were effectively forced into commoditized markets, and we're still dealing with the consequences of that.
Okay. I want to come back to the kind of Amazon side of things in a moment, but the final
Mm,
part of your story I want to dig into is the kind of partnership side. So I've heard a kind
yeah.
of lot of stories of partnerships not working out, some working out. What to you is kind of the fundamental reasons why yours and kind of Sim's relationship works so well from a business perspective?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think ultimately is that we've and this is by pure luck, not design, but we've effectively got opposite skill sets. So I don't know how much audience will know about Sim, but he's from a professional gambling background, and I'm from an accountancy background. So as you can imagine, he wants to take all the risks, and like I'm pulling my hair out, going, no, 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 we can't do this. We have to run the numbers. And so actually, what happens is we come to a nice middle ground, and there are always potential difficulties being family as well, and obviously with a business partner, you spend a lot of time with one another. I think what's really important for us is communication. I think that's very important. I think where we do well is that we don't attach our ego to any particular idea, and so if one of us disagrees with something that the other is doing or saying, that ultimately we're confident in having a discussion and actually disagreeing and then coming to a common resolution. And I think that's really important because obviously you want to make sure that the staff are seeing a coherent message going forward.
Okay. And then in terms of that kind of decision making process, I'm assuming, if there's a big decision to make, sometimes it can be you on the one end and Sim on the other. How do you resolve those kind of junctures, I guess, or loggerheads?
One of our sort of, we call them our ideals, but they're effectively the sort of moral compass of the company. But one of those is data driven, and so effectively, what we will make sure is that okay, yeah, anyone can come up with an idea. That's absolutely fine, but actually, as far as we can, and I appreciate you can't always do this, but let's put some information to it. Let's put some numbers on it, and let's make sure that we're in a position where we can make the most informed decision. And sometimes there is, you do have to make a bit of a leap of faith because you can't accurately predict everything with the information that you've got. But I think by always having a good business case, by always having the data that we need, it basically ensures that less often we're having to take unknown risks and those big leaps of faith. And I think that really helps.
I want to move on now to kind of talk about the different channel mix that you guys have. And I guess my first question is, in terms of team, how do you manage kind of the shift between, different channels? And I guess that's in terms of, team expertise, but also kind of culture and what people are focused on.
No, that's a very good question, and it is difficult because Amazon is a bit of a black hole, as I kind of said there. So we have someone that works exclusively on the off Amazon marketing side of things, and to be honest, she spends most of her time now on TikTok because we've seen some really really good results there. We're actually restructuring the company at the moment to build out that off Amazon marketing team, and something that really not changed our minds, but kind of made us slightly stop and say, right, actually, this now needs to be a priority. Was so my wife Nikki, Sim's sister, she's got her own jewelry business, and they're more off Amazon. They've got the website more deep, sort of direct to customer across Google, Meta ads, and things like that. And they've done a lot of training on Meta ads recently internally, and they had huge success with one of their campaigns. And when we look at what they're doing in terms of their back end, their email marketing flows, and actually how they're keeping and owning the customer, that obviously reduces friction to purchase and the cost of acquisition going forward. We've kind of seen that. Well, actually, that's kind of a way out of the sort of Amazon hustle a little bit, and not that we'll ever completely move that way, but it's just another whole revenue stream that we hadn't tapped into. And so we're actually collaborating with them at the moment, and we're looking at ways that we can share resources to build that off Amazon team to really drive some of our brands away from Amazon.
Okay. So is it kind of a case of sharing knowledge and upskilling the current team, or are you actively looking, when you look at new channels or new opportunities, do you look at hiring and bringing in new people?
So ordinarily, it was a case of we'll try and use what we've got in house, and that was very much a time where you know we were trying to be very budget sensitive. But what you realise with experience is that you can try and do it yourself, you can try and teach yourself, but ultimately there's always going to be someone better out there to do it than you. And you know, I've read Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time, right? If you haven't, I'd highly recommend it. But that was really the kick up the backside. I needed to say, actually, as a company, but also myself, we've got to let go. We've got to work through other people. We've got to hire in that expertise because that's not where we're going to add value. And so now it's more a case of, right, let's get the right people in the right seats. Let's hire externally. Let's hire people with expertise and let them run with it, give them the resources that they need to run with it. And ultimately, that's going to lead to exponential growth.
Hmm. And does that look like kind of, in-house hiring, or is that partnerships with agencies or kind of other external people?
We have used some agencies before. We've had a few bad experiences with some of the off Amazon stuff, and so at the moment it's all hiring in house. So I'd like to say we're getting quite good at recruitment. That's not to say we haven't made a lot of mistakes in the past in terms of the process, but yeah, I think we're getting pretty good at it. I think sometimes the problem is getting, particularly where we're based, if we want someone in house, we're based just outside of London, right? We're in Kent, so it's difficult to get someone to come and work for us when they could go and work in London for a big firm for a lot more money. So it's striking that balance um, and getting the right people in on the sort of right structure in terms of working in and out of the office.
Can you explain that hiring process and some of the lessons you've learned? Because I know that's a big headache for a lot of people. Is how do you find and attract quality talent?
Okay, so it depends on the position. So we run our own warehouses as well. So the recruitment process for someone that will work in a warehouse is very different to the recruitment process to someone that might be, say, a head of department or a senior manager. What we do sort of at the management level is we will put job ads out, whatever boards we can, but also we'll look at people within the industry as well. So we're part of a number of mastermind groups, networks. So we'll kind of go out to people there and say, look, do you know of anyone that's got experience in this, that can do this, and so on. And we'll try and make it an attractive offer, whereby, there is the opportunity of profit share and things like that going forward, or great bonus schemes, because I think it's very important to make sure that the company's success is aligned with, like, the individual's earning potential. Now, we will then put the candidates through a series of tests. So there'll be IQ tests, aptitude tests, test tasks as well. And to be honest, this is probably something that we should have done sooner, but there was almost like a reluctance to go through these multiple steps because it's like, oh, are we asking too much? It's like, well, actually, if we want to be the best, we have to take on the best, and we can't let people that aren't A players through that process. So they go through multiple tests. For example, we had a QC candidate come in recently, did a full day's trial test. We set that up for him. We've got some business analysts that we're hiring at the moment. So we've got them on test task. They'll then have a first interview as well. That's before the test task. That's normally with who they'll be reporting to. So depending on the level. So for example, it'd likely be one of our heads of department, and then there'll be a final interview should they get through the test task, whereby they can present their results to either myself or Sim, both of us. And at that point, we're just looking for softer skills. Like, we know technically that they're adept. It's more so, have they got the softer skills? Are they going to be a cultural fit? So it's quite a few steps, but it wasn't always like that. It was almost
Very
like,
stringent.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think
So
you've got to be.
is that kind of learning from mistakes, and you've just kind of tightened up and gone more in depth with the recruiting process?
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes perhaps we've taken sort of personal recommend, or not so much personal recommendations, but more so like friends that
Mhm.
could do a job for a little while. And do you know what? I think the key difference is the fact that as the business has grown and it's gone through a different stage, or going through a different stage in its life, that we've moved away from needing generalists that could kind of help out with a number of different tasks to actually now we need specialists. And I think that's the key difference, because we're really looking for technical knowledge first. Um, and then also, as I say, making sure they're a cultural fit. But yeah, we've made mistakes. Not so much in terms I don't think there have been too many that have actually got right the way through. There's been one or two that we've then had to let go because it hasn't worked out. But I think we've wasted a lot of time with letting poor candidates get a lot further through than they should have done, which ultimately takes up time of everyone in the recruiting process.
Perfect. Okay. Can I just ask now, in terms of the split, you've obviously got people in different countries. Can you just lay out roughly in terms of departmental org chart what people you have in kind of what different roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've kind of got a bit of a classic vertical org chart, albeit we do have employees that sort of run across that, and I'll explain what I mean by that shortly. But effectively, we've got four distinct departments, and Sim looks after two of those, and I'll look after the other two. So we've got content and creatives, which is underneath Sim, and then we've got sales and marketing, which is also underneath Sim. And then on my side of the org chart, we've got supply chain and operations, and then we've got financial planning and analysis, and kind of HR falls into that as well, which is effectively geared around our skill sets. Now, what we'll have in finance is what we have got is effectively an analytics team, and then we've got like a financial reporting team. Operations, we've got a head of operations, and then our operations manager on the ground, and then sort of all the warehouse staff that make things happen, and we've got a supply chain specialist. Um, and sales and marketing is slightly different, and this is what I mean by sort of the people that work across the org chart. So we've got a brand or a structure where we have brand directors, and then we have brand managers underneath them, and effectively they are responsible for pulling everything together. So though they are within sales and marketing, they're responsible for the growth and development of the brand. They're kind of working right across the org chart to make sure that things get done. Um, and then on the other department, we've got content and creators. So we've got our in-house design team that will do all of our images and video content there.
Okay, thank you. I think my kind of final question on team is, you're growing pretty rapidly. How do you kind of, I guess, not get too bloated? So yes, you want team to kind of support the growth and to get them in, spots where you're hoping to build things out. But how do you, yeah, ensure that you don't overhire, um, and just get too much bloat in there?
Yeah, yeah, that is a real challenge, and we've certainly made that mistake before. And obviously, it's not easy to go the other way on teams. It's never easy letting people go. Interestingly, what I'm working on at the moment is an internal project that we're calling Scale Ready. So I'm effectively sort of sticking a consultant's hat on, and really auditing all of our systems and processes that we've got in place. And I'm kind of going through each department, and working with the people that are actually doing all of the tasks, and saying, look, okay, what's the process flow here, and what are the steps that you go through? And so we're working really hard to identify all of the steps that each of us go through, because then I will then go away and analyze those and look at, right, okay, well, where are we doing this because it's the way it's always been done, or are we doing this because it's the most efficient way to do it? So effectively, that would be step one in terms of making sure that we haven't necessarily got the bloat by actually working with the individuals on the ground to say, right, okay, well, we've got a defined process in place. You've got your standard operating procedure. We've got the controls in place so that we can delegate effectively. And we've got systems in place to facilitate that process. And I think by doing that, we're looking at every step and saying, right, okay, well, we're doing it as efficiently as possible. So we know that we're getting the most out of the staff that are there. And then we can then make a decision as we grow. It's like, okay, well, actually, do we need to hire more, or is it because things aren't getting done efficiently? And actually, the next step on top of that is looking at all of those processes. And I was speaking to Sim today about AI agents, in terms of which of those processes can now be carried out by an AI agent rather than a human being. And that's not to say we're going to let everyone go, because that's absolutely not what we're going to do. But actually, if we can leverage AI tools to grow, that'd be fantastic.
For sure. And I think every kind of member of the team becomes more efficient, right, with the AM.
Yeah, yeah,
I want to shift gears kind of slightly now and talk about the brands that you guys have. So I think there's 10 brands, 10 private label businesses under the kind of Ideal Direct umbrella. Do you guys see yourselves as kind of brand builders or kind of marketplace players?
Now we're brand builders, and actually our sort of internal company strapline is that we want to build brands that add value and provide our customers with quality products. That is what we want to do, and that is how we want to define our culture. I think before, in the earlier days when we were kind of learning, it was effectively right. We found this product opportunity. Seems really great. We don't have a brand, so either we'll crowbar it into one of our other brands, or we'll just set up a brand specifically for that, right? And it worked for a while. It did work for a while, but I think it's fair to say that people are becoming more brand sensitive nowadays. I think there's been a bit of a transition. It was kind of like, right, okay, we'll only buy from brands. Then there was all this really cheap stuff that was coming from everywhere in the world, and so we'll jump on that train. And then actually, sometimes people realize they're not getting the level of service, or they're not getting the products that they thought they were. And so now people are identifying with brands again. And I mean, you'll know this coming from marketing, but from our point of view, it's like if we can build brand loyalty and build brand trust, we can then use that as an opportunity to own the customer, but also we kind of escape these price wars. Amazon, the fees are always going up, so there's always margin erosion, and sometimes it feels like a race to the bottom. But actually, if we can engage with the customer in a different way, if we can add value away from that, I think it's not necessarily measurable in the short term, but I think longer term, it's going to work wonders for our longevity and hopefully margin as well. So yeah, in answer to your question, we are now moving down that route of actually building good brands that do what a brand should do effectively.
Okay. And when you're looking at kind of new opportunities for kind of building a brand, are there any signals that would tell you there's kind of a gap or opportunity in the market, or that a brand in that space would kind of make sense?
Not so much at the moment. There is a brand that we are working on, and I'm hoping to get my wife involved because she will be much more of a knowledge centre on this than I ever will be. I don't want to talk about that too much yet because I don't want to give too much away, and it's very early stages. But I think for us is with one of our brands, Dear and Oak, we kind of stumbled upon that opportunity, and then it was like, okay, I mean, I kind of developed a really random passion for marketing. I love listening to Rory Sutherland and those guys, and um, yeah, we worked with Ben Leonard for a little while as well, just helping us with some off and stuff. And yeah, I really got into it, and so we kind of, out of interest, we then sort of started dipping our toe in some off Amazon marketing and looking at our email flows and driving traffic to our website, and TikTok, and all of this for that brand, and we really saw the value in it. So right now, it's like I say, we've got that brand that's in the very early stages that we have identified a bit of a gap in the market, albeit that's probably by accident. But it's more so, right, okay, we're looking at the brands we've got now that are already doing well, that albeit largely on Amazon. It's like, how can we extend those elsewhere? Because one, we're going to make more money off of Amazon, but also it's going to make our experience on Amazon a lot easier.
Okay. On that point as well is I guess more of a maybe a personal question, but how do you know that you have the bandwidth, or the team has the bandwidth to focus on something new, and that would have kind of higher returns than focusing on the existing portfolio?
Uh, Good question. I guess we don't always. There there is kind of an element of let's give it a go and figure it out afterwards. But I'm always very conscious of creating overwhelm and putting too much on the team's plate, considering how busy they already are and doing a phenomenal job, I might add. But that's kind of goes back to why we're looking to leverage expertise from my wife's company, and we're looking to make external hires so that actually we can kind of ring fence these projects at least to start with, and our brand directors and brand managers will be involved to some extent, but a lot of the heavy lifting will get taken care of for them. So they might be involved in terms of the initial brand strategy, but ultimately we're going to have whether it's Google Ads experts, Meta Ad experts, branding experts that are going to be doing everything for them. And I think that's the idea. And again, going back to what I mentioned about the internal project that we're running through, is I think if we can get everything as efficient there as possible first, then we can make a decision and an assessment on, right, okay, well, is there any existing capacity from the team that are working on Amazon to cross over to some of this stuff? Otherwise, we're going to use bring new people in to deal with that.
And then I believe all of your current portfolio is launched by you guys, right? Is that? true?
Yes, it is. Although, and it's a bit of a sour point, we were collaborating with an agency to launch in the USA. Now, we've had to shelve that for the time being for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Our good friend Donald Trump hasn't particularly helped there. Um, but yeah, in the UK and in Europe, we've always launched ourselves. We have tried a couple of launches in the USA. It was a lot more difficult, a hell of a lot more difficult. But we found in terms of our knowledge and our understanding of how the UK and European marketplaces work, we can launch pretty well there.
Okay. I want to come back to geography, but my question now is in terms of launching versus acquiring. What are your thoughts there? And have you previously kind of tried to acquire businesses and grow them rather than launch from scratch?
Well, funny you should say that. We actually had an offer from one of our competitors a little while ago. I won't mention any names, but I think I mean they were running the business part time. They did a very good job with the resources that they had, and they actually approached us asking, look, you're clearly the number one player in this game, like in this niche now. Look, do you want to? I want to sell. I want to get out. I'll give you first offer. Um, it didn't quite make sense for us there, but I think with our infrastructure and with our expertise that we've developed over a number of years, I think there certainly is an opportunity to take some brands on whereby there is a lot of potential, but the individuals running that business haven't necessarily been able to realize that potential. It's certainly a fast track to growth. So I think if you're going to do it, you've got to do it very carefully and properly, of course, because these things can be very cash intensive. So yeah, I think right now the focus is on growing our existing brands, but I I can see us taking on one or two in the not too distant future. To be
So
honest.
if it's kind of the right opportunity, you would certainly look at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then, yeah, just kind of touching on what you said previously about geography. So you're kind of UK based, obviously, and mainly focused on the UK with some Europe. Is that true?
Yeah, I think probably. Oh well, yeah. In terms of overall revenue, I think we're about 75% UK now. Probably about 15 to 20% Europe, and then the rest is USA. We actually plan to change that drastically, but yeah, most of the focus is in the UK. We've actually got a bit of an edge in the UK. We're seller fulfill prime. We because we do such a large volume, we we're able to get very good rates with our couriers, and so we've actually developed a bit of a hybrid model. We built our own repricer, which means that during cut-off times, the our SFP offer will win the buy box. So then the order's rerouted or routed for our warehouse where we make more margin. But post cutoff for SFP, it switches back to FBA, so the customer is always seeing next day delivery. That's been a real fruitful strategy for us. So that's been great. It's meant we've been able to be more competitive on pricing, particularly on bulkier items than a lot of our competition. So that's worked really well. And for Europe, we kind of stripped back our catalogue a lot when we were on the vendor program. Amazon basically told us, look, if you launch in the UK, you have to launch in Europe. And what that meant is there were a lot of products that weren't doing particularly well that were just there to tick that box. And we were kind of getting the fruit from the UK. We've kind of stripped back all of that and we're focusing on the real big winners. We've had a few supply chain issues, but I anticipate that Germany in particular, but Europe will probably get to like, if we forget USA growth for the time being, we'll probably get to about 40% of the business quite quickly.
Okay. And you mentioned kind of the USA there a few times. Was it the plan to focus more on that before these kind of tariff changes? And has that now changed?
It's not the end of the opportunity. I think there's always a way around it, right? And we wouldn't be entrepreneurs if we gave up at every barrier. But so we had, I think it was 3 launches that we put a lot behind. I think we've got 5 or 6 containers that just finished manufacture. Now we're lucky, very lucky, that we can redivert those to the UK and we can store them and dispatch them ourselves. So that was a bit of a get out of jail card, but we had invested a lot in research. As I mentioned, we were collaborating with the guys over at ClearEads on that one. So there was some sunk cost there. Now the problem that we've got is that everything's so uncertain. I think if we knew that the tariffs were going to stay where they are for the duration of time, you can make a plan, right? But obviously we don't, and it seems to be changing with the wind. So we're effectively just going to stand back and see what unfolds over the next month or so, and then we'll make a decision on whether we go again. But right now, it's difficult to get the margin that we need, almost impossible,
Sure.
in fact.
Okay. And then you kind of, we're talking about tariffs and supply chain. I want to kind of roll back a few years and just talk Brexit. How much did that kind of implement the business for you guys?
Yeah, Brexit was a very tough time. As a percentage, I think we're doing more in Europe than we are now. And we used to fulfill everything from the UK, right? So we'd send from our UK warehouse over to the fulfillment center in well, wherever, France or Germany, and it was very easy, right? It was very easy to get goods across. Um, One of my biggest frustrations actually when we got through the transition period, it's like, right, okay, well now we need to abide by the new rules, and actually anything leaving the UK to Europe is an export and an import. I was kind of talking to some of the big hauliers and customs brokers, and they just didn't know what was going on. It was like nobody knew. It was so frustrating. So in the end, what we decided to do is we set up with a 3PL in Poland. Initially, we went via Germany. That came with some difficulties around duty calculation methods and stuff like that. But we settled in Poland, went out to Poland. There was a lot of admin to do. I had to go fly out there, visit the bank, set up a bank account. And one of the big pains there at the moment is that if you're importing into Poland, you have to pay your import VAT, which is deferred here. Then you've got to claim it back, so it's cash that gets sunk in. Actually, we're working on deferring that now, but so it wasn't without its difficulties. But now it's up and running. We've been pretty much since Brexit. We've been running that model, and it's working really really well for us. But it was just a case of we just couldn't suffer the duties twice. We couldn't suffer the cost of freight twice. It was like, right, let's just get it directly into Europe off the bat.
Okay. And is that bringing it in kind of from China direct to Poland?
Yeah. It is, yeah.
Okay. And on that China side, I know there's kind of a lot of talk in the past few weeks with Trump of them kind of losing that number one kind of export position. Do you think that's true? Do you think there's anything to that? And are you looking at kind of other alternatives for that kind of manufacturing or route of supply chain?
Well, actually, one of our brands that we launched, can't have been, I think it's actually only been live for 2 to 3 months, and it's done phenomenally well. And all hats off to our brand director there, Tom. But that's effectively gone in 3 months, gone to a seven-figure brand, and that's with a UK manufacturer that we've made that work. So there are other options. I think in terms of the so-called like decline of Chinese export, I actually think is a bit of an opportunity for our UK and European markets at the moment. I think they're going to want to, suppliers and manufacturers are going to want to replace the business that they're currently losing from the USA. I think on top of that, the Chinese government have allowed the RMB to devalue, right, against the dollar, and so that puts us in a better purchasing position. And we're now, actively negotiating with all of our suppliers, which I would urge everyone and anyone buying from China to do so. So I think certainly in the short to medium term, there's an opportunity there. Where it goes from here is kind of anyone's guess, but I think having success with that UK supplier has really helped us. And I think the brand that I mentioned that we're going to start off with Amazon, we're
Hmm.
looking at UK and USA suppliers for that as well. So I think there was always a little bit of a subconscious worry about over dependence on China. But I think that's kind of been brought to the forefront a little bit more. And so if we can find another, another route to market, another supplier, we certainly will.
But it sounds like kind of yes or no to answer my question. It sounds like China's doing quite a lot to accommodate people that still want to buy from them. But then there's also opportunities
Yeah,
in
yeah,
mutual. Okay,
yeah, absolutely.
interesting. Can we talk marketing now? So obviously you guys are pretty focused on Amazon, but if I'm hearing correctly, there's still kind of a shift off of Amazon, maybe a focus on TikTok and the D2C model. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So initially, the TikTok play was if we can go viral on TikTok, then ultimately, we don't necessarily worry too much about making profit on TikTok. Like if we can do it at break even, that's fantastic. Because what we saw when we were experimenting with that was that we were getting a lot more in terms of branded search term on Amazon, right? And we know the algorithm loves external traffic, so that was great. But then actually, well, when we look at it now, it's like, well, we can reduce those affiliate percentages. We can charge a little bit more, and we're still doing quite well on TikTok. With Deer and Oak, our brand there, we're doing a lot more in terms of PR. We're doing more in terms of SEO and stuff like that. Again, it has come down slightly to resource constraint with everyone getting sucked into Amazon, but with this sort of new restructure and bringing in off Amazon expertise, we're really going to be pushing that. And actually, Sim and I are due to go to we've got a pop up at Hampton Court Palace that we're going to do that we never would have thought about doing, right? And it seems bizarre, like we're running, an 8-figure company, and we're going to be standing at a market stall speaking to people about our brand, So, but it's great because we want to be having these multiple touch points with people. We want to engage with the customer. We want to find out what they like. We want to find out, what interests them, so that we can position ourselves best to serve their needs. So, yeah, in answer to your question, there will be more of a push to the off Amazon stuff, and I think that's probably one or two of our existing brands, but then the newer brand that hopefully we're going to get going with.
And aside from kind of the odd pop up here and there, what are your thoughts on kind of B2B and kind of retail channels?
Look, it's clearly a model that can work and can work extremely well. My I've actually been in a position where I've had clients in my past life that have had huge retail contracts, and they've just pulled the rug from underneath them. I think quite often it can be a case of, everything is dictated to you. It's very hard to negotiate on terms, and ultimately it's a huge cash flow drain because some of them won't pay you for 90 days. That being said, if you want to be a nationwide brand, then it helps to be in a John Lewis or somewhere like that, and so there is a balance to be had. I think you've got to be very selective with who you partner with, um, and I think you've got to do it when the time is right. I kind of hear a lot of people that their sole aim is to get into retail. It's like, well, retail generally is on the decline, so you're already selling online where the growth is. What's the desperate need to move towards, an avenue which is going the wrong way? And I get it, it's brand recognition and everything like that, but I think sometimes people just see that as the holy grail, but don't actually think as to why they believe that. So I think it is important to make a very honest assessment with the risk reward of that, and actually why you're doing it.
On that point, so I was having a chat with a guy called Preston Rutherford, who I think IPO Chubbies, so they're like a 9-10 figure kind of US business. His viewpoint is that at a certain point, the kind of D2C or online market caps out. And he said at that point, that's when you should kind of make the push into retail, acknowledging all the kind of other downsides of that as a channel that you said. But do you think that's kind of a valid point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And if you listen to the likes of Hormozy or any of these sort of business gurus, they always say that you've got to fill one cup up completely before you move on to the next. And I think that's exactly what he's described there. I think for a lot of people, they've only got a cup sort of quarter or half full before they move on to the next one, which again is a distraction, and can mean that sort of things start to go wrong. I think the other thing, obviously, to consider is if you're looking to exit a brand, being in retail is great for your multiple. There's no denying that. And so, if you're building to sell, then it should be part of your strategy. Um, Obviously, that's not necessarily what we're trying to do right now. But yeah, I think it comes back to timing and circumstance.
Okay. And I think you're also saying not spreading yourself too thin. There's a lot of opportunities on the table. Focus on the few that you can really scale up pretty quickly.
Yeah, stay away from shiny object syndrome. It's a real killer.
No, I hear you. Going back to kind of Amazon, then, can you just talk through your kind of main focus areas on the platform for growth in 2025?
Well, as you know, or if you don't, go and look it up. But Sim's very much a guru in the main image space. Does a lot of seller sessions on that, and you know really has got a great knowledge base there. So we're making sure that our main images are as good as they can possibly be. Like we've found that just a focus on that has probably been one of the biggest levers that we've pulled. So that's been really good. I think the other one is market penetration outside of the USA right now. So we've got a lot of products that have done phenomenally well that we've got lined up to go in Europe. But I think it's as well as that in terms of our catalog, it's refining our focus. It was really interesting actually. Sim did a bit of an analysis on our profit, and it was almost perfect Pareto. So I think it was something like 21% of our products were driving 79% of our profit, and we're like, well, why are we bothering with that 300 there? Let's just get rid of that and really sort of go inch wide and mile deep. And that's kind of what we've been doing. And we've changed our culture slightly in terms of that. And hopefully that's going to reduce the overwhelm with the staff. It's going to mean that we get more value on our time invested in any one product. And actually, yeah, we should see some growth through there. So yeah, really those three things I would say: main image, moving into other marketplaces with Amazon. Interestingly, there's another one, Amazon Ireland. There's not one gone live, so that's probably one that we'll explore. And then just refining our focus.
Okay, so does that last point mean kind of stripping back the product portfolio of stuff
Yeah,
that's not
yeah.
selling at a high level?
Yeah, we've been really aggressive with it to the point where it's like we tried running deals, and some instances it's worked really well, but we'd run quite aggressive deals just to sell through. But in other cases, we've just gone to liquidators and said, look, we don't want this anymore. Just because we actually we're in the process of buying another one, but we've run out of warehouse space as well. So it's not just the fact we can't afford to have dead stock just lying there. There's an incremental cost of storing it now. So. Yeah, a lot of times we've gone to liquidators. Do you know, it was really funny actually. We had a product that we we'll still be discontinuing it, but we just got some stuff up on TikTok and it went viral and it was selling like hundreds a day out of nowhere. It was like, well, where was this when we were making the decision? But yeah, so it's just kind of we're going to take a bit of a short term hit on this, but I think the upside is that we're going to be able to focus more as an organisation, and that's infinitely more valuable in my opinion.
Okay. How do you balance that though between kind of that mindset, the 80/20, but also still launching new stuff if you still want to hope that you get kind of the next winner out of that launch?
Well, I think the first thing is to make sure that we've got what we call a product validation flow, which goes right from product research to effectively final sign off at director level. And our aim is to make that as sort of systemized as possible so that it's very easy to do that we're using automation where we can, that we're using tools where we can, so that ultimately it's not that onerous to identify these opportunities, and that we don't have to have these huge meetings where everyone's in them and it takes so much time out of everyone's day. So I think it all comes down to that. I think if we can do that successfully, then ultimately we're going to have a machine that we're effectively going to be able to put more through, and the results that come out of it are going to, it's pretty much going to be linear. The more we put in, the more we get out. Right?
And is that you kind of knowing almost before you launch to a certain percentage point that, this is going to be successful?
In the UK, yes, we do a hell of a lot of research. And actually, obviously, as you'll know, from ideation right through to actually launching the product, there's quite a long time period that passes, and so we're always making sure that at certain points throughout that process is we're kind of reanalyzing the opportunity to make sure it's still there. Now, you can't always guarantee it. Sometimes you'll launch, and then a week later, competition comes in and and just really goes for it. But by and large, we're really thorough with the research that we do, and so. And given the fact that we've also got the ability to dispatch ourselves and sell on multi channels, the very worst that's ever happened is we've just held on to the goods and it's taken us a little while to sell through. We haven't lost any money. We just move on to the next opportunity.
Okay. We talked there about kind of the positives of Amazon and you guys are kind of focusing on. Are there any kind of headaches you're facing or any causes for concern? Yeah, I know there's probably quite a few, and you may not want to answer this one, but is there any that kind of spring to mind?
I was going to say, how long have you got? Yeah, Amazon, as we know, are very difficult to work with. I think we so Adam, our head of sales, has done a phenomenal job in terms of the way he's managing our PPC versus sort of deal campaigns, and we actually got our TACOS. I think it was like 4 or 5% across the organisation, and it was the most efficient we've ever had it. And that was because we were combining it with really strategic deals that we were running. Now, Amazon have, I think it's from June this year, but they're changing the way they're charging on deals. They've basically cottoned onto this and said, right, rather than charge a flat fee, we want to charge a percentage of sales now. So that's a bit of a pain in the backside. I think Cashflow. Cashflow in any inventory based business is always going to be a problem, but it was in August last year that Amazon started charging local VAT on FBA and referral fees. So obviously that's a cash flow drain, and then holding on to cash a bit longer to cover returns has been a problem. I know a lot of people manage to get that extension period, but sooner or later they're going to have to deal with that. So cash flows the other one, and I think just generally there's a hell of a lot of competition now. The sort of barriers to market are not perhaps what they used to be, which is, I think is why when we're sourcing now, we're trying to go for things where there are more barriers in, because we know we've got the knowledge and expertise to get over those, whereas other people might stop. So that gives us a bit of an edge. But then also, there's a knock-on effect with the US tariffs, right? We could see a lot of US sellers come over to UK and European markets, and there's going to be a lot of dumping of products because they don't want to go through US customs. So we've got to keep our eye on that. That's going to have we're going to see a shift in the market, probably downward price trends, perhaps. So a lot to consider there.
It's not always fun, hey?
No, no, I've got a few more grey hairs than when I started. Put it that way.
I want to touch on kind of what you're saying there, though, in terms of managing, inventory forecasting and supply chain complexity. How do you manage this across a pretty broad, product and brand portfolio, multiple kind of geographies and marketplaces? That is a lot of moving parts. And how do you stay on top of all this stuff?
Yeah, it's not easy. And but it is getting better. We actually, funny enough, when I first joined, one of the first things I did was sort of digitalize inventory management. My father-in-law was still using sort of pencil and paper, and I couldn't believe that was still happening. The amount of time we were spending on that was phenomenal. Quite admirable, really, that he managed to do it. But yeah, we've so my head of finance is also like a data genius, and he's developed we kind of called it Idealytics after Ideal Direct. But so we plug in to APIs for all of our information, whether that be sales and profitability, the search group performance data, but then also inventory data right across all of our platforms, our own internal systems, and we've got various things where we collect data manually. So we've effectively got data lakes where all of that information is poured into now. There was a lot of development, and it's still going on. But ultimately, we've just got sort of we've got automated reports that just refresh themselves, and they'll give us indicators based on different sort of sales velocities as to how and when we need to order. And then on top of that, we're putting together a forecast. So obviously that's looking at historical data, but we'll also put together a forecast which we'll sit down and we'll speak to the brand managers and the brand directors, because obviously what's happened in the past isn't always an indicator of what's going to happen in the future. So, we're using data as best we can, but we're sort of keeping that interaction between our business analyst and our brand managers and brand directors to make sure that we're not missing anything. But we never get it right. In fact, we went too far the other way. I think we're now holding on to too much stock because we just didn't want to run out, and now we're having to pay for external storage to deal with it.
Okay, you can never win, hey?
No, no, no.
Okay. I want to kind of finish off by just talking about the long-term vision and what you guys kind of want from the future. So, yeah, obviously you've been going for, is it nearly 50 years?
The company has, yeah, the company's been going for a while. So, the good news is that Peter, my father-in-law, kind of achieved his aim. So he's he's not overly involved in the business. There's still certain areas he likes to be kept up to date with, and we do that, and that's enjoyable to have those discussions. I think you never really know what's going to happen in the future, and Sim and I have kind of had sort of broad discussions on this, but I don't think we'd necessarily want to sell the business in its entirety. It would be nice to be able to pass it down the generations, although kids might tell us where to go. I think what's more likely is that we perhaps sell some brands and have some liquidity events along the way. But ultimately, I'm really passionate about building something and developing people and being the best leader that I can be. And so I think really what we want to be able to do is create an organization that effectively runs itself to some extent, so that we can then kind of step away a little bit, really empower those people that are doing such a great job now. And then we can perhaps work on other things
Okay. So the
sort of
long-term
alongside.
vision is almost build the infrastructure, potentially carve out some brands for exit, but keep the machine
That's
running.
it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Okay. What is the kind of driving force behind that? Like, why not? I feel like a lot of people building for an exit event. You seem pretty adamant that that's not what you want to do. Certainly in the entirety.
Yeah, do you know what? It just feels a shame. We've spent so much time and energy. I mean, there's been some. I'll have to catch up with you one time. There's been some incredible stories, some weird and wonderful stories, and it's just like we kind of want to see that through to the end. And I genuinely believe, we if we do this the right way, and because there, there are Amazon businesses which are not like any other business, and they're probably not set up in the same way, and they're very different. And I think we've created this whole infrastructure and this whole footprint of a company that is more than just an Amazon brand, if that makes sense. So I think really we just want to see how far that goes, and to be honest, I think it'll be a very difficult sell as an entire unit.
Okay. And then kind of the flip side to that is, would you consider raising capital to go kind of further and faster towards that destination?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we're lucky enough at the moment. We've managed things well enough that we're completely debt free. We're doing okay there, and so it's not something that's on our immediate horizon. But you know, I'm confident in our sort of financial environment and the way that we appraise products and the way that we manage our cash. That if the opportunity is coming through our system and it's saying right, it's cash flow positive, or or the margins are in our internal targets, then I'd have no qualms with taking on funding.
And is that, potentially, especially if you're using debt to acquire Nuco, would that be possible to kind of have it as a separate entity but still utilize your kind of human capital infrastructure on that and try and grow it?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a group of companies now, effectively, and to be honest, I think now like I say, we've got the main trading company, which as I mentioned, we very likely wouldn't sell, but where we're now of the opinion, actually, yeah, maybe we can sell one or two brands. We're trying to ring fence those in their own limited companies so that it's easy to offload. So, absolutely, if that opportunity comes up, it probably would be in a separate entity, just under the same parent company.
Scaling an ecom brand is hard. That's why we're on a mission to share as much info as we can to help make it easy. From weekly interviews with the biggest names in the space, to case studies, brand breakdowns, and tips and tricks, and much, much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out.